Today we have software developer Matt Brady and our VP of Development Bruce Kratz here for a discussion on AI prompt engineering. A couple quick housekeeping notes before we get started. If you need captions for this webinar, you can enable those from the captions icon at the bottom right of your GoToWebinar. The webinar will be recorded. We'll send out the webinar and any slides for it within about 24 hours. You can look for those in your email, and then they'll also be posted on our website under Knowledge Base, Webinars, and Events. If you have any questions throughout this, you can use the questions or chat sections on your GoToWebinar panel. We'll have people answering questions, some throughout as they're able, and if there's any that we are not able to answer at the time or they're not relevant to this specific webinar, we'll follow up with you after. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce and Matt.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Bruce. I am the VP of Engineering here at RunSignup. I've been at RunSignup for about 5 years now. I've been in software engineering for 30 plus years. So I've seen a lot of stuff, but this AI stuff is truly amazing. And we're going to get into a little bit of what we're starting to experiment here at RunSignup. But my role here at RunSignup is basically we have an awesome team. So it's really just to stay the heck out of the way so they can do what they do. And yeah, let me have Matt introduce himself as well.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for coming to this. I'm a software developer here at RunSignup. I've been here for a little over a year full-time, but before that, I was a co-op and intern. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how AI has impacted my job, and it's actually changed it quite a lot, even though I haven't been here that long. A lot's changed. So we're going to get into different strategies I use during my day-to-day work, and that maybe they could be useful for you guys as well.
Yeah, so as Matt and I were kind of discussing what we wanted to cover, we were a little torn on making this really developer focused, which is obviously what we concentrate on here in developing the product, versus something that might be more useful to event directors. And we kind of took a middle of the road approach. So some of our examples might be a little bit more in the coding area, but the concepts apply to most all of the AI products that are out there and people are using. So just getting into a little bit of the agenda, we're going to talk about prompt engineering. It's more than just what's in the little box that you type into with ChatGPT. And if you start to understand what goes on in the background and how your requests are getting processed, you can start to figure out how to maximize the accuracy of the response and what the AI returns to you. And Matt's really taken an interest in this and has done a lot of research, mostly around our development, primary development tool, Cursor. But again, what he's learned is probably applicable to a lot of different products out in the market today. So, when you think about prompt engineering, it's really the art and the science behind what the LLM is going to return. Now, we thought what we would do, because like any IT topic, there's a lot of acronyms that are flying around, and we're going to probably be referring to those. So we thought we'd go and just talk through some of the terms we're going to be using and just give a base level of understanding to everyone on the call. So first of all, I think we've all heard LLM, or large language model. What that really is the model is trained on a vast amount of data. And that is the kind of basis for the pattern recognition that these products are doing to return the results to you. The most popular LLM is actually GPT. And I think probably a lot of people don't know that the GPT in ChatGPT actually stands for something pretty techy, which is generative pre-trained transformers. So the LLM is generative in nature. It's going to create a generative response, and it's pre-trained. So basically, it's been pre-trained on a set of data, large amounts of data, the entire internet, large amounts of code, that sort of thing. And T stands for transformers, And transformers is the concept or the architecture or the method that all of the modern AI tools are using. The transformer paper was like a famous paper published by Google, I want to say 10 years or more ago, that really launched the most recent innovation that all of the companies are doing. And Google shares a lot of their technologies publicly. So they shared this one publicly, the transformer paper, very, very famous paper. And that launched a lot of these businesses that are now, quite frankly, in competition with Google. So it's pretty interesting how that all came about. But that's what the GPT means in ChatGPT and some of the other products. Matt, jump in whenever you would like. But I think the other two things we're going to be talking about today are context and context window. Yeah, so go ahead.
I'll just add in here the context. The idea of this context is what gets sent with your prompt. So the prompt is what you type, and the context is what surrounds that prompt. It might be something you explicitly gave to the LLM, or maybe something that it's picking up on its own. I'm going to get more into detail of managing that context and how that can give you better results from your LLM and the AIs that you use.
Yeah, I like to think of the context window as kind of like the working memory of the AI. So it's got the big LLM, but it doesn't have, the working memory would be what you've recently talked to it about, what files you might have open if you're coding. And so that becomes part of its context window. And context window size varies based on different products and models that you're using. So some have a larger context window than others, and that's going to impact, how much memory, so to speak, the AI has to work with as far as understanding the additional information that you're giving it. At the end of the day, like, this is pretty incredible technology, but it's not magic. It's rooted in computer science. And so you have to give the AI some context as to what you want it to do, just like you would if you were having a human do this for you. It's going to have a much better result if it has an understanding of exactly what you want it to do. The other thing that comes up a lot is the thought of tokens. And a lot of times we hear about tokens because that has turned out to be the unit that a lot of the AI tools are using to charge. So that's part of their pricing model. But really the tokens are how these LLMs have pretty much broken down a unit of data. It can be a character, it could be a part of a word or a short phrase. So it's not a one-to-one to a word, but essentially, all the data that's been ingested to make the LLM has been tokenized. So it's been turned into numerical values, and that's how it stores it and makes it easy to retrieve and recognize patterns and so forth. So, there's tokens for text, there's tokens for images, there's tokens for audio. So we're going to talk about tokens potentially. And also because that's the driving force between the processing power needed to process everything, that turns out to be what a lot of companies have used on the pricing model as well.
Yeah, the tokens are going to consist of basically the prompts you send it, any system prompt that ChatGPT has already given it, and the context. So maybe conversation history, stuff like that, all goes in and plays a role in how many tokens you're using.
And there's input tokens and output tokens. Input obviously are the coming out of your prompt, and output needs to be converted from the tokens into, text when it goes in and gives you the response. The other term that is thrown around quite a bit is something called RAG. I guess I went ahead a little bit here, so we could talk about, I think, parameters. I'll let you touch on parameters, Matt.
Yeah, the parameters are, you'll see them listed with a lot of different LLMs, and basically what that is how much the model can learn. Since we're talking about artificial intelligence, think of that as the brain capacity of an LLM. You'll see smaller LLMs have maybe 1 billion parameters, but then when you get up to ChatGPT, which is on the internet, it has like trillions and trillions of parameters, and all that's saying is like that's how much it's able to be trained on. More parameters doesn't always mean a smarter AI or a smarter LM, but it gives it that larger capacity to learn, so it usually results in that, because it can be trained on much more. So if you think of the parameters, that's really just like the brain capacity of that artificial intelligence.
And then we'll also be talking about types of prompts, something called zero shot prompt or multi-shot. Zero shot is kind of trying to create this gigantic prompt and send it through, and there's some disadvantages of doing that, versus breaking it up or doing what's called a chain of thought prompt, where you're in more of a conversation with the AI, which allows it to break the problem up into smaller pieces, and usually gives you more accurate results, especially when what we found when coding. And then RAG is a term that it stands for retrieval augmented generation, and it kind of puts a lot of these things together. And I have a little diagram here we can go through. So if you think about typing in your request, the RAG part, so the retrieve part, is when, so your prompt is going to go through, but it's going to look in and find the context that you gave it. So in the example of like our coding work, we have let the coding AI tool, Cursor, index all of our code. And so that goes into a vector database, and that becomes part of the context that can be retrieved and augmented with the prompt that we gave in order to produce a better result. So it's retrieve, augment, and generate. That's what RAG stands for. And it's part of the process that's being used to enrich the actual prompt that you're typing in with other information, patterns, examples, and so forth that you're going to provide, that's going to have it give you a better and more accurate response. I think we want to get into some examples, but one of the things we kind of wanted to point out here, and it kind of represents a little bit of what we're talking about with RAG. So you're going to see this common UI on a lot of tools. So this is Google Sheets. On the right is your chat box where you can ask it your prompt, and on the left is your context, what's going to be included, so that, you know, because obviously it doesn't know my exact numbers, the LLM, but it understands numbers and formulas. And so it's going to augment the prompt that I give it with my actual numbers. And that goes into the prompt where I ask it, hey, generate me a chart representing, that gives me some insight into this data. And that's pretty much what most of the tools are doing today. This is V0, which is I would call it a no code type of tool, where you're entering in your prompt on the left and it's generating a full application for you on the right without actually having to even interact with the code. And RunSignup has done quite a bit of work here with V0, and we have other information on that. And then there's Cursor, and this is the primary tool that we've been using here in the development team that does something similar.
Yeah, Cursor is what I use to write code. It's just like any other IDE. If you don't write code and you're not a software developer, just think of this as something like Microsoft Word or something where you write, where it's an editor. It's a text editor, and then if you look on the right, there's the chat that's been added to it. So prior to Cursor, I would use VS Code, and this is exactly the same as VS Code on the left. What it adds is that is the AI part. So that's how things have changed for me, is about, I guess, like a year ago, I would just be writing code by hand, and then we used Copilot which is already built into VS Code, which is another AI coding editor. And I used that first, and then now I use Cursor. So it's just how it's changed, and I'll get into how Cursor works and what that actually provides as a service for us.
Do you want me to go to your notes next here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So yeah, so what Cursor actually does is it's a context manager. And so like how we talked about context is it's what gets sent with your prompt. So Cursor isn't an LLM. It uses LLMs like Claude or ChatGPT or Google's Gemini. So it's not actually writing any code or doing it for me. All it's doing is managing my context. And like we said, it indexed all the code in our database and saved them to vectors that it can refer to. And since it's using those large LLMs, it has a large brain capacity and it can learn different patterns that we do and write pretty good code. So the different ways it manages our context for us is there's the automatic context that draws without me having to say anything. And this will include things like the files I have open, where my cursor is in the file, nearby code, recent edits I've made. So if I keep doing repetitive things, it will pick up on that and it will say, oh, he keeps deleting this or changing this name from one thing to another, and it will start making those changes for me. It also takes in the chat history, that's automatic context, and that chat history as context goes across all chatbot LLMs you'll use. So when you're using ChatGPT, that is something to keep in mind is your chat history is that automatic context, and it's something that you kind of want to keep in order and keep clean because it's going to be a big driving force on the quality of responses you get. So then the other thing that Cursor
Matt,
provides.
so question on that. So when you're using ChatGPT, which I think most people have used by now, when you're working with it to figure out something or talking to it about a subject, and then you want to switch gears and talk about something totally different, you should really start a new chat, right? Because that's going to reset your chat history and the context won't get confused since you're going to another topic, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Because like we said earlier, there's those things called tokens, and that has kind of like a max capacity. So if you keep this long chat of a bunch of confusing and different topics, you'll get poor responses. But if you keep your context like really small and specific, you'll get good results. And yeah, if you keep starting new sessions just for very specific tests, that context should be clean and you'll get better responses. The other part of Cursor, and just when I say Cursor, you can kind of think of any of this like applies to all AI and LLM things. It's just what Cursor provides for us is that good way to manage that context. So in the manual context, it's your prompt. You can tell the LLM what you expect from it. You can tell it, hey, I want you to respond like this. I want you to maybe not make any code changes and just work as someone who gives me advice, or maybe I want you to review my code. You can give it a role, things like that. So that's also part of your manual context. You can provide files to it, maybe images, the code index, which is what I talked about before, where it actually you manually say index these files and I want you to learn from them. Cursor also has rules that you can give it. So for coding, we have a bunch of standard patterns and practices, and we can give them as rules. So then when it actually goes to write code, it will follow our rules. So what gets sent to the model is a system prompt, which is hidden behavior rules that were given directly by Cursor. We don't write those. They're written by Cursor, but if you're going into ChatGPT, you can write your own system prompt. It could just be the first thing you write. You can say you're an expert developer or you're an expert in whatever, and that will give it a role, and that will have an effect on how it responds. to the things you say. The other thing is that automatic context and the manual context. So that's what Cursor does. It doesn't actually think, it doesn't actually write code. All it does is manage that context for us and then sends that prompt with that context off to the LLM. So that's where Cursor's job is finished, and the job of the LLM begins.
I had some specific examples we can probably pull up that are from V0. Why don't I do that? And I want to encourage anyone who wants to ask questions, go right ahead and ask questions, and we're glad to take those. And because really we're just kind of doing a little chat on how we use this, so it's really whatever's valuable to you. This is a excerpt from a chat session that I was having with V0. And so I was trying to create an application that looks like this, which is basically a utility to help me with a customer that had custom questions in RunSignup, and they had put something in their custom question. It was an employee ID that later they found out probably shouldn't have done that. And so they wanted to blank them all out. Now we have a way to blank out custom questions in the UI, but it was thousands and thousands of participants. So they needed a way to do it in a batch because there was no way to do it easily in the UI. It would take forever. So I was writing this utility to do that, and it was pretty rudimentary in the UI, where just give me your key, the race ID, and some basic question, then upload which participants you want to change, and it would run through and do those. Some of the things I ran into was I was using the RunSignup API. And so I told it where the RunSignup API is, but I didn't give it a lot of direction on what API endpoints to use. And at some point, it basically made up its own endpoints. So in order to figure out what was going on, I asked it here to add some more logging, which it did. I reran things. It returned an error. My application returned an error. I didn't bother reading through the error. I just posted it back in and said, analyze this error for me. And it started to narrow down what some of the issues were. And basically by looking at this and some of the errors, I determined that it was using an endpoint called race questions that does not exist in RunSignup. It basically made it up. So the way to avoid these things is giving it better context. So, if you're using V0 with RunSignup, you're going to want to go to the RunSignup API. I can spell. And maybe get yourself a plan on what API endpoints you're going to want to use for your application. So in my case, it was get participants. And there was a parameter in here to get questions, to return questions, and that's what I should be using for. Let me find it here. Sorry, race participants. And include questions. And so this was the parameter it should have been giving to that endpoint. But since I didn't give it much direction, I just pointed it basically to RunSignup's API, but I didn't tell it which ones to use. It got a little confused. So by doing a little homework in the questions, you can give it a better idea of what to use. We also have this handy specification here, which you can go ahead and just download it and paste that into your, you can actually do it this way as well. And this is the specification of the API. And then you can go and copy that and paste that into your prompt as part of the context that it would use. So it has more specifics on that particular API. But that's just one example of where I could have done a better job of giving it better context. I think the other thing that I learned about prompting and I haven't done a lot of work with V0. We've got some other folks in RunSignup that have really done some great stuff. It wants to satisfy your request. And so you can easily have the application get off course and start changing, in my case, code or parts of the application I was writing, and basically creating regression. And I found that once that was happening, what I wound up doing was asking it to tell me what it was going to change without changing it, so that I had the option to make less risky changes little by little versus having it go off and do its own changes. And I'll give you an example here. So in this case, I had my application had a switch to point to RunSignup's test instance versus RunSignup's production instance. And I was using what's called an environment variable to say if it was in test or production, and use the right API endpoint in order to switch back and forth. And it wasn't working correctly. And basically, after discussing this with the AI, it found its error that I think it says it right in here, that the test URL was hard-coded in the application. And obviously, I didn't want anything hard-coded because I'm using a switch to switch back and forth. And so when it's on test, I need test.runsignup.com. And when it was on production, I needed runsignup.com or api.runsignup.com. So it corrected that error, but then I thought, hey, this was a pretty basic error. And so I wanted to know everywhere else where this error might have occurred, but I didn't want it to go off and make a bunch of changes I didn't know about. So I basically asked it to check your own code and find other errors like this, which it did. And if you get to the end of this, it made a bunch of recommendations of things it found, but it didn't change anything. And so this gave me a chance to look through them, and 1, 2, and 3 were pretty straightforward. So I said, yeah, go do option 1, 2, and 3. Option 4 was kind of creating a utility function, which would cause it to have to rewrite and refactor a bunch of the calls it makes to this utility factor. And to me, that was a little bit more high risk. Good idea, but didn't want to do it all at once. So this is a good way to basically coach your AI. But I always tell it, just analyze and tell me what you're going to do if I'm going to do something kind of significant, but don't make any code changes. And if you don't say that, it will make code changes. And I found that I got in a lot of places where I would go backwards. So that was some of my kind of prompting experiences that I wanted to share. Matt, I think you have a couple as well.
Yeah, I can take control of the screen and I can show off some of the examples that that I've had using AI to code. Like I said, about in January is when we first started using Cursor or just AI in general to start coding. And I was looking for different ways that I can actually start using it, seeing places where maybe patterns are repeating, and it would be a good use case of AI to write code. So one example is here there is a feature where we wanted to allow sub-accounts to be added to a membership, and we wanted to get this UI in here on this membership self-serve portal, and it already existed. So this adding a member already exists on our website. Anytime someone signs up for a membership, they just get to select any sub account or their account easily with this. And we wanted to get that in to the self-serve portal. And this is the exact same thing as there. I'm just repeating it. And this is repetitive code that would usually take me about a week to achieve, even though all it's doing is copy and pasting stuff, maybe changing some variable names and getting it to work. But since I knew that it was just this repetitive process, I thought this could be a good job for AI to do. And what I did was I wrote up a very detailed, in-depth prompt on what I hope to achieve. And this is what I gave to Cursor. And basically what this is saying right here is it's saying, hey, these are the templates where it exists. I want you to take those and put them in these new ones. This is the backend code that exists. I want you to put it in the new file. And this is the JavaScript. I want you to put that in the new file as well. So it's very in-depth and puts up a lot of guardrails so the AI doesn't go off the rails and start doing stuff I don't want it to do. And I was able to get pretty good results. I was able to get it working in maybe an hour. It made changes and it was halfway there probably in 15 minutes. So it saved me. This was something I did in a day when it probably would have taken at least a week. So it saved me a lot of time as a developer because this was code that already existed, but it's still a process of adding that functionality. So it was making me a lot more efficient as a developer. Another example that I've come across is right here is there is a small problem on production where when someone was uploading a CSV, the fields in the CSV file weren't mapping correctly. And this was a bug that was reported to us. And I was able to try and get to use AI to actually investigate the problem because I thought that would be quicker than me actually going through all the files myself and figuring it out. So just a basic rundown of the conversation I had with AI was I had it pull that issue that came in GitHub, and I told it to investigate where this problem occurs and give suggestions on what needs to be fixed. So do not guess and think out loud because I didn't want it to hallucinate and give me kind of like garbage answers. So what it did was it actually thought out loud. It investigated it step by step, said where it was looking, gave me a nice problem analysis on what's happening, and then offered a fix. So I was able to look at this fix that it said do it in this file and make these changes. And then I said, they look good, go ahead and make the changes. And then Cursor actually went into the files and edited them. Since I didn't actually write the code myself, I wanted to test this. So then I said, can you give me the link I need to go to test these changes and also the conditions that need to be true? And then it went through, it gave me the URL to go to test this out and gave me the conditions that need to be true. It told me I need to create a membership organization. I need to have permissions to edit the things, and then it gave me the step-by-step changes I needed to make, and it even gave me a CSV header that I could use to test it. So this not only helped me write the code, but it also helped me test the code. And this is just another example of it helping me become more efficient. So this whole way of writing these prompts and making them detailed enough and specific enough that it doesn't run off the rails is something that I've been trying to get better at. And so with that, I wrote down kind of like rules of how to talk to these LLMs. So
Before we go into that, Matt, I wanted to ask you a couple questions here about your previous two examples. So I think first of all, I think it's kind of funny that you have to tell it not to guess. But this is definitely, I guess, a trip up hazard with AI tools. It seems like it wants to satisfy you with an answer, even if it can't figure it out. And so what Matt did by saying don't guess is gives it the out almost. You almost have to give it an out that if you don't know the answer, it's okay.
Yeah, because the role of the LLM is to give you an answer, and it's going to give you an answer whether it is correct or not. So by saying you don't have to know it, it gives it an out. So it's not going to just throw nonsense out there, which
now
it will.
Yeah, nonsensical responses were, I think, pretty prevalent when all this stuff first came out. It's been improved greatly, so the hallucination factor has been less and less. Um, but that is still something to be concerned with, and that's why, the same approach I was taking when I don't want you to just go and change code just because I said something's broken. I want you to tell me how you're going to change it, and that way I can see, what approach they're going to take. And if it's a bad approach, I can get involved in modifying that by having a further discussion. Are we going to
Yeah,
say something?
when you give it these big prompts, especially like it's something with a lot of steps, in order for it to, get to the final conclusion, it's going to make a lot of assumptions on the way. And the larger the task, the more assumptions it's going to make, and it gives it a lot more room to
Yeah.
go off the rails.
So you can give it that big, you can have a big discussion with it without having it actually get started. So you can have a discussion with it to come up with your plan, but not have it go off and do anything yet. I think that's also a good strategy. Um, the other thing I kind of wanted to touch on here, it's a little bit of a sidetrack, is
Really quick before you sidetrack, then I
Yeah.
have a question. What do you say to coworkers who insist that the LLMs hallucinate and aren't business ready? Is there anything to say, or is it just kind of the same as someone who viewed the internet as a fad in the 90s?
Yeah, I mean, I think this quote's been out there for a while that the versions of the AI tools that we're using right now are the worst ones we're going to see. In other words, they're getting better every day, and they're getting better at a rapidly fast rate. So it is true that the nature of this technology is you won't get the same answer twice. It's generative. It's generating an answer on the fly. It's not like a script in a piece of software where it's always going to come up with the exact same, follow the same pattern and come up with the exact answer. But that also is what gives it a lot of its unique strengths, and the ability to speak to humans, understand human um, language and emotions almost, which is something that you know has never been done before. So I think this is for someone who's still a skeptic. They're going to have to. There's some people, they're going to have to try to figure out ways where they can use it to enhance their work, and that's kind of what Matt's done. I think we were all pretty skeptical here at RunSignup when it came to coding. Um, we have a really highly reliant system. We don't have a lot of, if ever, outages. I don't think we've had an outage for a number of years. And we hold that very, very close to the vest. We don't want to just have an AI tool going in there and screwing things up for us. So we were very skeptical, but we've approached it in a safe way that's starting to give us a lot of benefit. So yeah, it's a tough question to answer with the skeptics, and they're going to be out there. But I think keep trying to make it useful.
Yeah, I would say that like the LMs, like they do hallucinate. I think they always will hallucinate to a certain degree. They might get better and smarter, but if you don't know what you're doing, the LM's not going to be able to, figure it out. The LMs, and nor do you want it to. It's not going to do your job for you. It's not going to know what you don't tell it. So you have to really nail down what the problem is before you ask it a question. You have to really put up the guardrails and say, here's an example. I want you to follow this. I want you to do this. And you will be able to get it to do something that's helpful for you. Like it might
I
not
think
be able to, what
one
was
way
that?
I think one way to respond to coworkers that are critics is to say it's a little bit operator error. I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, because someone might say like, oh, you can't use AI for that. But if you prompt it in a certain way, like one person might say it doesn't work and another person will be able to get it done. Um, you really got to be specific with what your prompts are. You can't say, um, make this work and it's going to make it work. Like you have to be specific. And I think that that's also a good thing because if I could just, fire up ChatGPT and it could do my entire job for me, I don't think that would be good either. So I think that it's kind of like you need to have a really good understanding of what you're doing in order to make it do exactly what you want.
This was kind of related to my sidetrack in that you showed a couple ways where AI has been pretty helpful with your coding work. I didn't, I wanted to make sure that everyone understands we're not letting AI write code and deploying it to production. This is essentially another tool that, Matt is still, and the rest of the development team here are still figuring out how to harness. But, as you saw, he asked for an analysis and, requested that it give him some options to fix a particular issue. But then he's going to take that and figure out which ones he wants to implement. And I think the other example is where these AI tools really shine, which is, hey, I've done this a number of times. This is the membership example you gave earlier. This is a very repetitive and tedious task, and I can do it, but it's going to take me a week. But I have a model of how I've done it in the past successfully. And giving the examples always help AI give a better result. And so by giving the example of how he had done it previously, gives us a better answer. But again, maybe real quick, once you, get your AI response on the coding side, what happens before it gets into the product?
Wait, what was that? Before it gets into the like it has to go through.
So you used AI to basically duplicate the membership issue you showed us before.
Yeah.
And it wrote some code. What happened from there?
So I test it. I open up a pull request. It goes into code review. Two of my coworkers have to sign off on it, test it, and then after two people sign off on that, then it can get deployed.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we hope AI does a good portion of the work, and it's helping us with keeping the code consistent and using all our rules and all the tedious checks that humans had to do previously. But at the end of the day, we're still having our colleagues look at code and review it and test it and make sure that it meets all the security and performance standards that make it up to par. So anyhow, wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, those code reviews can take longer than the actual writing of the code sometimes.
Yeah. Although I think there's hope with having a little AI assistance on the coding reviews. That's yet to be, that's coming to a theater soon. You were going to go into another topic. Why don't you get
Yes, so I was just gonna kind of talk about the lessons learned here, and this could also further answer that question, which is, so how we talk to these LLMs, what I learned was you have to manage the context. So you got to give it good examples, not just examples of something that already exists. You could also just give examples of patterns to follow. And what I mean by that is that could be something as simple as telling the LLM how to answer your questions, the format they want to answer it, and maybe you want to replicate something that's already been done. So giving good examples is a great way to get better results. And what's good about our code base is we have thousands and thousands of files of good, well-maintained code that we can refer to. And I think that's what gives us a leg up is those code reviews that we've had. There's not a lot of garbage code written in our code base. We are pretty strict on what's in there. So there's a lot of good examples that we can give to our LLM and say, hey, can you try and replicate this to the best of their ability? So managing that chat history, like we talked about, that's a big part of your context. So this is what that few shot or multi-shot prompting is you're not trying to one-shot it, which is the first example I gave back in February. I was trying to write up a lot of prompts that were big, giant paragraphs, and I've kind of learned that might not be the best approach for it. I could have accomplished the same thing just by treating it more like another person and giving it context, asking what it thinks, not letting it edit code yet, telling it to do research on its own, and then once I think it's ready, I let it actually write the code. So for people out there that actually use Cursor or Copilot, a good thing to keep in mind is the files you have open are very important. So don't keep open a million tabs because that will muddy up the context. So just know that anything that you have open will be part of that context. So overall, the prompt engineering is kind of what keeps the results on the rails and avoids that hallucination. So if you're not specific, you'll get the hallucinations. So the way to avoid them is give the LLM an out. Its whole goal and purpose is to give you an answer. You can change that purpose by saying, you can say you do not know, or say, this is a really good one, is ask follow-up questions for clarification. Anyone who uses ChatGPT, that's a good strategy to use. Have it ask you follow-up questions. It will give you a lot of follow-up questions, maybe things that you didn't even think about. And as you answer that, you can go through, say it gives you 10 questions. You can go through all 10, give your answers, and you'll probably get a better result from that. So back to this few shot prompting, is you keep it conversational. Imagine it's just this person that's you're training, or someone that's right next to you. It's like a intern or something. As you learn something, maybe you tell that, or maybe you're about to go look into, if it's a coding example, it's like, how about you do some research on these files as you do it? You kind of bring it along for the ride. I think Copilot is a good term for that. But you give it information, examples, background, have it ask you questions, tell it to research things for you, and then maybe you'll need it for something and you can ask a question, or that will just build up a lot of context for the LLM. So I think that's just a good use case, is you kind of just bring it along for the ride and let it learn with you. Instead of having it try and do your job for you, you just kind of try and use it to make you more efficient. So not like a total replacement of the work you do, but just trying to enhance it and make you a better worker. So yeah, that builds up your chat history, which is the context that we talked about before, and can lead to better results.
Yeah, I think the summary here is breaking things up into into smaller problems, avoiding kind of that gigantic prompt. The context is really important. Managing the context is important. Giving examples and making them, will make it more accurate. And it's not magic, is what I tell people. You have to get good at it. You have to put the time into it to get the results that are going to make you more effective. There's new tools being deployed both in RunSignup and outside of RunSignup every single day. And I would encourage you to experiment with them and see what kind of benefits you get. I'll just give you a quick example. Recently, those of you that use Gmail, and we use Gmail here at the office, they got the little Gemini icon there next to your inbox. Over the week, I guess over the weekend or Monday, I'm losing track of days, we had that big AWS outage that a lot of companies suffered from. Luckily, RunSignup got through no problem. But I needed to write up a report on what happened with that incident and how well we fared. There was like 75 emails that went back and forth between myself and Bob and senior engineers and the CTO. And so I literally just clicked on that icon and said, hey, can you summarize? Can you give me a timeline of everything that happened as we were investigating the AWS outage? And, in seconds, it took all these emails from all these various people and put it in a nice, concise summary form that made that part of what I needed to do to understand that day really, really easy. And, you've got to experiment and see what these tools can do for you. I don't think we had anything else today. I wanted to ask Johan if there's any other questions that we can cover.
Don't see anything else in right now. I think
Okay, great.
you are good.
Well, I really appreciate everyone's time, and feel free to reach out to us, anytime, and let us know how you're doing with AI and any feedback you'd like to give us.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks, Bruce and Matt.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.